Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand under the company Horns of Odin. As always, before we jump into the show, I do have to plug our Patreon. I know if you're a long-time listener of the show, you're probably sick of hearing me go on about it, but it is how we keep the lights on. It's how we keep the podcast going. The main perk you get is a bonus episode every single week, and you get access to the full back catalogue of those as well. And these are our Q&A episodes that we do with our guests. And they're basically an extension of any show that we do. So after the main show finishes, we'll sit down with the patrons and they'll ask their own questions. And a lot of the time, there is a ton of bonus information to be learned because we miss things. We forget questions. We overlook things. We get stuck in, conversation. There's loads of stuff to be learned. They tend to be very fun, a little light-hearted. So if you can, go check out Patreon/Nordic Mythology Podcast, and it starts from £3 a month, less than a cup of coffee. And if you can't, then just a 5-star rating, positive review wherever you get your podcast. But aside from that, let's get into today's show. I'm really excited about this. We've had this one booked, unbooked, booked again, moved it around a little bit, but we finally got a chance to do it. First, I have to introduce my co-host and in-house archaeologist, Mags Havgar.
Hello, happy winter holidays, whatever you do or do not celebrate. I hope everyone's having a wonderful time.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're in that in-between period between Christmas and New Year. And our guest is Giorgia Sottotetti, who is an Italian archaeologist with an MA in Viking and Old Norse medieval studies at the University of Iceland. And she's joined by Kári Pálsson, who is an Icelandic folklorist, antiquarian, and a musician specializing in old Icelandic literature, pre-Christian religions of the Norse, and Icelandic folk beliefs. And you've both been on here before. So yes. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Whew, that was a whole ordeal. Yeah, that was an ordeal getting to here, wasn't it?
It was just right.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Thank you very much. And we're going to talk about the Galdrabók.
Yep.
Who wants to go first with explaining what that is?
I would say Kári.
I can maybe start.
Yeah.
Well, at first I want to maybe start with the reason why I started to touch on the Galdrabók.
Mm-hmm.
We had our great friends, Joseph and Lauren, who run Hildir.com. The book publisher Hildir. They came over to Iceland, and they're constantly looking for new material to be published. They publish a lot of stuff, like on
a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, like a lot on folk belief and plant stuff and
Scandinavian and Nordic material.
And he told me that he went to the Árni Magnússon Institute in Reykjavik, and he came across this interesting grimoire. They had a lot of figures on them, and they were like
creepy drawings
of people with lines through their eyes and through their ears. And he thought this was an interesting topic. So we started to talk about the Galdrabók, because we're not seeing many copies in Iceland being sold of the Galdrabók, but definitely it's a very famous book. And he asked me if I'm up to the challenge to translate it and talk about it. Then I said, yes, certainly. And then
to add this unedited material?
Yeah, and then add this other manuscript, which I think is bloody interesting, that I will mention later in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to transcribe the manuscript and then translate and write a little introduction about the book and brief history of magic in Iceland in general. And the Galdrabók is a book that was written sometime in the 1600s, written by 4 people, 3 Icelanders and 1 Danish person. And it seemed very likely it was written for the largest part here in Iceland and then moved to Denmark. And then...
Which is maybe why it also got preserved, maybe?
Yes.
Like, that's question mark.
And this Danish person wrote just a small portion in the end, and he was basing it on Icelandic material. But in this Galdrabók, in this book of magic, you find a lot of various methods how to deal with birth trouble, how to
many spells
and spells.
Like, a lot of spells.
But a lot of spells and protection magic and protection formulas, like how to control, how to help with birth control, how to help against bleeding, against nose bleeding, and how to
not to die.
And
in the sea.
How to calm nosebleeds, and how to avoid drowning at sea, and how to get someone's love, how to
all kinds of remedies, really.
Yeah, all kinds of remedies and all kinds of charms. And in this manuscript, you find a lot of mention about saints and even pre-Christian gods, and a lot of classical figures as well, which Giorgia, she wrote a great index about that and explaining them.
Trying to put a bit more into context, like maybe we could actually, we have the book here that, by the way, got published. So if people want to buy it at hildir.com, that's available, open for grabs. But maybe we can also, during our chat, take a few spells that maybe are a bit funny, and we can read them so people can also to understand a bit what the material is about, because maybe without reading it, you lack a bit of context, so you don't understand exactly what it is about. Maybe we should do that, Kári. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
That would be fun. What do you think, Dan?
There are some are really...
Yeah, sounds wonderful. I'd love to hear some bits.
That would be fun. Also, I apologize if this was mentioned and I didn't catch it, but when is Galdrabók from exactly? Do we know? It sounds...
in the 1600s.
We don't have a calendar date.
No, of course not.
They base it on the writing, and like they can see by the type of writing and
the material
and how the letters are spelled, they can narrow it down to the 1600s. Some actually think it's from the 1500s, but recent arguments suggest 1600s.
Yeah, more likely.
Mm-hmm. So the material itself, is it likely from that time? Or is it likely much older? Because obviously it has Christian references, it has references to Old Norse religion, I guess, or gods. Yeah. So, yeah.
It's a very good question. And I think we can say both it is old and new. The fact that it's mentioning pre-Christian gods doesn't mean that it's a continuous tradition.
It's not an unbroken tradition. So,
but at the same time, Icelanders at this time they had access to various written material which mentioned pre-Christian gods, and basically the pre-Christian gods are now being put in the same category as fallen angels or something like that. They're becoming demonic, but they have function, so they are being called upon. Basically, they're calling upon various saints, and each saint...
Not really saints, is more biblical figures. Because this is like actually Lutheran context, so it's like post-Catholicism. This is something we need to underline. Iceland was Catholic, but then from 1550 becomes Lutheran. So, and I think you see that also analyzing these grimoires from that period. There are a lot of biblical figures, but not saints.
Sorry.
That would be...
You did the index, not me.
I did the index, so I'm just throwing
that's a good indicator of age to a certain extent, I would assume then. Because then you would see kind of the liturgical change, meaning like the religious...
So it's definitely post-Catholic. You see that as well, looking at the material.
Mm-hmm.
And they are they have various purposes. So this calling upon these figures means that the spells can have multifunction to a certain extent. And at the same time, we have to think about this is a time when Iceland, we didn't have professional doctors, we didn't have modern weather forecast, we didn't have modern safety. So people took advantage of what they had, and they used what they had in their hands and what they had access to.
And if I
Yeah.
Are you done?
Yeah.
So another aspect, when you read this material, I think it also is sort of a mirror. It mirrors the society of that time. It's very interesting because most of these spells are actually very mundane, like, all kinds of spells and remedies more for protection, or like, if your nose bleeds, then recite this spell and do this with this herb and stuff. So, and there are also many others, like, for example, against your enemies or against the evil, or against, all kinds of protection also from weather, from a sea storm, from a storm. It's just like, it tells a lot about, I think, society back in the days, especially in Iceland. It was very harsh time. You, exactly as Kári said, you don't have any amenities, modern amenities, possibly all over also in Europe, but especially here in Iceland, you're very isolated. Nature is very overwhelming, especially during winter time, like you're really, you are fighting for survival basically all the time. You don't have so much food. Most of people, you live in turf houses, in farms. So it's quite harsh conditions. So like I understand why people, although this was not the mainstream kind of knowledge you would seek, it was actually very, very dangerous to seek this kind of knowledge. It was very dangerous to own a grimoire, because this is also the period of witch hunting. So like you would be, if you are busted with it, you risk to be put to death, to be burned. It's quite harsh times, is quite difficult, but nevertheless people would have this material. This material was circulating, and it was more like all kind of material, like spells mostly for protection, sometimes to cause harm as well. But it tells a lot about, at least I think, about society back in the days, which I think
because that's super. Yeah, that's super interesting, because also, especially with the added fact that you guys mentioned now, with how dangerous this would be to be in possession of, it also then is a really interesting kind of or like indication of the kind of things people felt they needed help with. Like I think that's what I love about being an archaeologist, is like finding tidbits of evidence that tells us something about, just kind of like gives some sort of a glimpse into the day-to-day of what life would actually have been like. And then you have this grimoire, which could potentially be lethal to own. And you open a page and it's like, how to not bleed from your nose.
Exactly. There are also nasty.
There are struggles.
Yeah, basically. But then there are also some nasty spells, like how to cause harm to your enemies, or there are like fart runes, like you hate one.
I love that so much.
So you cast a spell on him, like to give him diarrhea and a lot of farts, and it's quite hilarious. Also, there are some spells that are like, wow, okay, but
some things never change.
It's quite interesting.
But also, to answer your question, then, is it old or not? Well, most of these grimoires, they consist of various symbols or drawings, and definitely during this time Iceland had access to various European literature, and in Europe during this time, a little bit before, there were a lot of grimoires circulating in Europe, which had a lot of different kind of magical symbols, like Seal of Solomon, for example, just to give.
Yeah, that's very European, and then it arrives in Iceland.
Then it arrives to Iceland, and this was to Icelanders very exotic. And so, this is something new, and so we cannot say that these magic symbols are pre-Christian or from the Viking Age. They seems to be later. And as Erik Storesund and Alicia Bauer has underlined, many of those symbols found in the Icelandic grimoires, they can be found in, even Greek manuscripts from the 1500s. Not identical, but very, very similar.
Yeah.
But then again, the method, how you use them, they seem to be drawing from local belief often.
Yeah,
so you have
because
this
they're put into the Icelandic context. So
yeah, you have this blending of new and old. And oftentimes you have also all kinds of formulas. And even one, if I can just name an example, there is this love charm, for the lack of a better word, that says that if you want to propose a woman,
if you want her especially also to say yes, to love you back,
then if she refuses, you have this curse on her, and it alliterates, and it seems to be something from the oral tradition. And it's argued by Nata Lindqvist that this is something that is related to skirnismál, which deals with similar things. So we have this continuation of thought and continuous method of how to get women's love, as I say, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, lack of better word. Yeah, it's more like, if she doesn't say yes, or if doesn't love you back, then you put this curse on her, and then like he will suffer always of cold, or she gets sick, and like you put a lot of it has a similar structure of skirnismál, when Freyr wants to
Eddic
poetry. So it's very old material, when Freyr wants to get the love of Gerdur, but she's kind of pushed into marry him, and she's constantly threatened, if you don't say yes, if you don't become the wife, then I put this curse on you, then this will happen to you, and so on.
I mean, I gotta say, it always works on me. If someone confesses their love and then they threaten me, then I'm like, I'm down. This sounds like a good deal. I am here for this.
do we ever see that the other way around? Like a curse for a woman to make a man fall in love with them?
Not that I've come across.
No.
That's a good question.
That's that's interesting. Although you have some charms of love in general, where they don't specify this is, to make a man or a woman. I think it's just more neutral, like love charm. So I believe a woman could use that on a man as well. Although it's more often the examples where a man tries to get the love of a woman. Like also there is one spell, you carve this sigil, this symbol on a piece of cheese, and you let her eat it. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
For example.
At the same time, these manuscripts were most often written by men.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they were learned men, like people who were priests even, or students, or someone who were studying some kind of academia at this time. Just to give you an example, the Galdrabók has a great resemblance to
a previous
manuscript called Skálholtsskræða, a grimoire of the Skálholt, which was central place
here in Iceland. Yeah, the bishopric in the south of Iceland.
In the 17th century, some student got busted with this grimoire by the bishop, and he took it away from them and punished them. But he wrote down the index before destroying it. Yeah. And it resembles the Galdrabók a lot. So this seems to be some kind of material that is circulating in Iceland.
That, although obviously, once again, was forbidden. It was forbidden kind of knowledge.
Yeah. And we have a lot of records about when people are being punished, they burn the grimoire in front of them, and they are supposed to let the smoke from the grimoire go through their nose and smell it. Part of the punishment.
Wow.
I know.
Okay. I have
it's quite weird.
I have a question, because you said that they were written down by priests. But I thought these were
not all of them, but
to keep, as in like you would be punished if you kept one.
Yeah, the priests were dancing a little bit of a line. Priests had great access to various kind of material from Europe. And Iceland, of course, in
also
general.
Underlining at this time, especially also in Iceland, if you're a priest, you're a very learned person. You go to the school, you go possibly to Skálholt. So you are a learned person that, as you say, you have access to material, you have access to books. There was a library. So sometimes I think also just, out of curiosity, you basically get to explore this material as well.
Under the guise of education.
Yeah, but also like, I mean, the church has been known to make sure to document and keep documents that wouldn't be proper for lay people to have. But the church, I mean, what I think is really interesting, and I feel like especially in maybe this is just a prejudice that I have, but I feel like sometimes in outside of academia there's this kind of perception that the church would destroy everything they disagreed with. But that hasn't really been my experience, but it was rather that sometimes there would be a lack of access for non-clergy people to grab a hold of it, but that written material would be transcribed and would be preserved and it would be archivized, like they would keep it.
For example, for this manuscript that got destroyed, the one that the students got busted with, before it got destroyed, actually we know more or less what it contained because the bishop or whoever was there at the Skaulolt, Brynjolfur, he basically wrote it down. He wrote down the index, not the whole thing, but before destroying it, he still recorded what was it about and then destroyed it. So here we go. And but it's a pity we don't have it any longer because I think there were about 80 spells. That is basically the double of what Galdrabók contains, although of similar nature. But we don't have that any longer, unfortunately. And I think also the students that had it, they were actually very lucky. You know, I think they got expelled for a certain time from the school, but they didn't, they weren't condemned really for that, or, just, I think it's because maybe they enjoyed a good position in society, and perhaps also the bishop himself was not necessarily super harsh. So eventually it ended up well for them, with only the manuscript to get destroyed. But it's not always
And one of the students said that when they were interrogated, that he managed to get this material from his friend in the Westfjords, if I remember correctly.
So is quite
there's a lot of copying and exchange.
This material is circulating, so it arrives from Europe to Iceland, and people manage to read maybe physical copies, and then they copy it themselves. Or they talk about it, So it's material that really it just, it spreads, which is quite interesting.
But definitely it was used and written by. My gut feeling is that it was mostly young men who were doing this, and once in a while, one priest was a little bit studying it, and maybe wrote down something, but. The thing is, if your priest has this in his possession, rumors can start to circulate. And we even know that even in Skálholt, where the bishop was, we know that he had, Agrippa in his library.
Yeah, the Philosophia Occulta. Don't know if you... Cornelius Agrippa is from, 1550, like the book. So that, once again, is European material, but... it arrives in Iceland. It was in the library in Skálholt, right? So we know that it was there. So once again, I think it's very fascinating because, I don't know, I feel sometimes maybe people have this perception of Iceland being a bit isolated, so, but that's not true. It has never been true, also during medieval times with literature and stuff. You have a lot of literature from Europe arrive in Iceland, be translated in Icelandic, be readapted into the Icelandic context and society. So that's why we have a huge literary corpus here. So Iceland has never been isolated in that sense. And you see it once again also with this kind of material from Europe to Iceland. And then also, as Kári said, then readapted once again to Icelandic context. So you have like spells that they do make a lot of sense in Iceland, for example, how to protect your sheep, if you have a lame horse, like how to heal your horse, and a lot of stuff that is actually also very practical.
So cool.
So if you have a book like this and it's been collected together, like you said, by four people, do you think that book would then stay with one individual who people would then go and see and say, I need help with my dog. He's sick. Can you help me? Or do you think that they would have their own copies and then take it away and do it themselves?
Well, this is a very good question. Grimoires, they can be also very personal. So I believe it's something that maybe people didn't necessarily share. Maybe they would share the content of it, but then you would have the book at home, or you would hide it, obviously, because you're not supposed to have it. Also, let's always underline that. I think maybe a few people that you trusted would maybe come asking you for help, but that was also very, very risky, because then as a person can come to you for help, another person, your neighbor, can also accuse you officially, and then you risk your life. So that's, we don't know much, but I think people would have this material. Grimoire can be very personal, so sometimes you have like similar symbols when you compare the grimoires that we have nowadays that survived, that didn't get destroyed. Sometimes you have similar patterns, but at the same time you can have like spells that have the same goal, but they have different symbols. And I think because that also, you would write your own manuscript, so sometimes you would make it also more personal, like Galdrabók. Sometimes they differ from each other.
But then who made them up? Who created each sigil or each spell? Would it be the person who possessed the book and they would try it out and test it and then write it in the book? Or would this come from elsewhere and they'd be told that this would work and then they would try it?
Both. I think it's definitely a mix of both. Kári, maybe
I think it's a mix of both. And certainly you see in the oldest grimoires that we have, which is from the 1600s. Well, there is one grimoire from the 1490 to 1500, which is a copy from which is based on a Danish healing book, but the Icelandic one contains some magical sigils and symbols. But the most of the magical grimoires that are now preserved are mostly from the 19th century. But the ones from the 1600s, most of them got destroyed, and we can see that oftentimes they are written various ways, and I think that they were being a little bit based off European symbols, but at the same time people were maybe personalizing them, perhaps. But the one from the 19th century, they become a little bit more, how do you say, like stylish. They're becoming more like circular symbols. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is more recent material, like in the 1800s. Well, you're not accused really to be a witch any longer, so it's safer. Like people have a lot of fascination for this kind of material, and people either copy something that maybe was still, circulating, or still this knowledge never really disappears, but is a bit safer now to have this material at home. So then we see people like maybe copying this material. So you have several manuscripts from the same time period, 1800, that are quite similar to each other. But then you have also the same type of spell that has the same goal, let's say how to heal your horse or how to cause harm to your enemies, but the symbols are very different from each other if you compare different manuscripts. And this is because, once again, it's also more personal. If I would write my grimoire, and Kári would write his, we would maybe have similar spells for the same things, but maybe the symbol I draw is different from the symbol he draws. Do you get what I mean? So there's some knowledge, European, from literature and stuff, that it arrives in Iceland, is partially copied or integrated, but then there's also a degree of how you write your own grimoire, because it's also personal material or personal experience, and maybe you're experimenting a symbol and it works, though that becomes more like.
Do Do you think that it's less personal and more bad memory? Because you're saying obviously because obviously if we have like a few copies of actually written down books, and let's say we have a secret meeting in the middle of the night, and you have a few friends around, and you're like, look at my book really quickly, memorize this sigil that you want or this spell, and you close it, and it's like, okay, you have to now go away and try and remember that a week later when your horse is lame. Maybe you won't remember accurately.
Point. I think that also, plays a role. Like you try to remember it. I think this is also not just about symbols, but in the spells, sometimes there are also a lot, in Icelandic we call it a bit a skita mix, like shitty mix, a blend of several formulas, sometimes also Latin, like religious formulas and stuff. And like some of them gave me headache when I was trying to translate them and put them into context, because the Latin didn't make much sense. And sometimes they were also prayers or quotes from Psalms or like biblical material, but it was quoted, it was not correct. The Latin was not correct, or the word was not correct. I was like, I think this person means this instead. Mm-hmm. And I think this is also what you're mentioning about memory, or something also that is oral and people are trying to recall it. And it's when you hear a song and you are not sure about the lyrics, but nevertheless you try to sing it or like to write it down, and maybe
I'm guilty of that.
Eventually the text is more or less that, but it's not exactly right. And this is you see that also in the formulas used in the spells in the manuscript. So I notice sometimes like, wow, okay, this person is actually, it means this sentence, but he forgot the word, or like he put a word that sounds very similar but is not quite correct. And sometimes Laura remembers when I was going through the material, I was like, what the heck is it? This is not Latin. What is that? And then I had to, it was challenging sometimes, but very, very fun indeed.
To trying to write Latin.
Yeah, try to crack the code. But and then this is also because people would maybe hear something or somebody read it aloud, but you didn't see it written, so you would just try to recall something.
I mean, that makes sense. When I first started speaking English, and I'd like my whole life just spoken Norwegian up until this point, and I started speaking English, started to write English.
Yeah.
When I come across those documents, I'm like, what am I trying to say here? What is this word? Because obviously I knew the word. I had no idea how to spell it though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not a chance.
Yeah. We have a few words that don't spell anywhere near how they sound.
I think the funniest thing was once I got like an essay back from my English teacher, and I think I tried to say obnoxious, and I don't even remember how I spelled it. I just remember that with my American pronunciation, I thought it was spelled with an A. Obnoxious. And so I remember the teacher had just written like in red pen in the margins going, I don't know what this says, but did you mean? And then they wrote obnoxious the way it's actually spelled. And I remember looking at it going, oh, that's how you spell it. Interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have words that all sound exactly the same, but mean different things. We have like 3 words for there. It's not very easy for anybody learning English, I guess.
I wonder, do we want to read out
some material?
For sure, yeah. So I think just to clarify, then this is a small book. How many pages?
230.
Oh, that's quite.
No, into totes this time.
No, so that's quite a big. It's a biggish book. Then I guess you could fill that with quite a few spells.
Yeah. But let's read out the fart runes.
Yeah.
For example.
Fun.
Okay. Yeah.
For the fart runes, you would you can see the runes themselves or the symbols themselves in the book. They are quite strange looking.
Yeah, they don't look exactly like runes, like how you would think about classical runes, but nevertheless.
Write these letters on white vellum with your blood. Draw blood from your thigh and say, I carve 8 Æsir, 9 Nauð, 13 Thursar, who will make your body suffer with nasty severe diarrhea, and stomach pain. And let them all make your body suffer with extreme farting. Let your supporters fall apart. Let your bowels explode. And let your farting never stop, day or night. Let you become as mindless as the fiend Loki when he was bound by all the gods. In thy mightiest name, Lord God, Spirit, Creator, Odin, Thor, Savior, Freya, Freyr, Oper, Satan, Helpers, mighty God, thou who protect thy followers, Utios, Mors, Noct, Vitalis. You have a lot of stuff going on here.
That was intense. And I am mature enough to admit that a good fart subject will crack me up any day. That was a good time. I had fun with that one.
I'm actually worried about my health.
It's quite nasty to wish personally.
I'm worried about my health later tonight. I don't know what have you just done to me? I don't know what's going to happen.
I will let you know if I suddenly have diarrhea out of nowhere. I know who to blame.
We were not reading it with intention, so hopefully you're going to be fine.
You say that now.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Is that? Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. I don't know what's going on with your hands below the desk. You could have a little bit of vellum with some blood. Doing all sorts.
But that's a pretty spiteful spell.
This is to do harm. So this is not a defense spell. This is really
if you hate someone really.
Yeah, if you hate someone badly.
It's a pretty metal fuck you.
Yeah. Quite much. And it was quite intense. And once again, you have this blend of, he's calling upon Aesir gods.
And Loki,
Thursar. And then, of course, you have like the Lord and Savior, Creator, like Holy Spirit. And then he also calls upon Satana. Okay, Satan. And then you have Odin and Thor. So it's like,
they're hedging their bets. They're like whoever,
just covering all their bases.
Whoever's up there,
like this. I feel like it's kind of an equivalent to whom it may concern, and it's like whichever one of you is relevant, please make this happen.
One of you is actually want to support me in this. Like,
I think it's probably worth mentioning. Like, all joking aside, the diarrhea would have been a little bit different to today. Whereas we're going to be okay. Whereas I imagine, in the
you take an Imodium or whatever, like, it's just you rehydrate yourself. Back in the days in the
1500s, it was probably a much worse situation. You've got all risks of disease and dehydration and
not just that, but the comfort of modern day diarrhea. We have usually a set aside room that is inside with heating, most likely, where we can just sit for however long we need. We can flush it down. It doesn't have to smell for too long. They maybe had to go outside. Maybe they had like an outdoor situation, or they just had to stand like an outdoor room, or maybe they just had to stand like leaning over a stick or some shit.
Yeah. And also inside the house, it's not warm, really. Like if you constantly have to keep the fire going to try to warm a bit, your turf house and stuff. If the fire dies, then it takes time to, it's just
all that methane in there from the farts as well. It's a bomb waiting to go off.
But this is one of my favorite actually. It's very nasty.
So.
You mentioned intent. Now, is that something is that a real thing? That it depends on how it's said? Is that written down anywhere that if you say this with intent, then it's going to be more likely to come true?
We have no indication of that, but I believe so, right? Like if you also are cursing someone and you're carving some symbols, I think you need to do everything right, but I think you also need to want it. If you're cursing upon someone, you put intention into that. I think that's also part of the magic, although they don't say, focus and do it with intent. But if I had to curse someone, I would make sure to have the intention to do it. But
do you so if the intent is kind of what really matters, I guess, then is that why maybe it doesn't matter that the symbols are different or the words are different, and then it can be personalized, because in reality it's not really about those things. It's about the intent you're kind of putting out into the universe of being like, I want harm done to this person, or I want this fixed, or I want this person to love me.
Yeah, I believe so. But of course, like, they also give you sort of indication you need to do things right. Like, for example, for this, take the vellum, use your blood. But as you say, yeah, we have different, like, sometimes for the same purpose, the spell differs. So sometimes it's like a wooden kind of tablet and you carve in it. So sometimes there's no blood involved. Sometimes instead you use herbs. And, it's like you have a lot of different variants, but sometimes the spell is pretty similar because you want to achieve the same goal.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. Now, the fact that we see Thor, Odin, Loki, and Christ, Satan.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that the symbology is there? That it is kind of both. Is it because we are, in the 1500s, when it is, Iceland has been Christian for 500 years. Yeah. So is it because maybe the old ways, the pre-Christian ways, are a little bit naughty, so they kind of lean into this idea of that it's not, these aren't things that you're meant to have, so we're looking back at a time that also isn't allowed, and maybe they use this? Or is it a case of that they're leaning on things that maybe they've come down through an oral tradition and actually were used by people who believed in these gods?
Well, I'm not so sure about if you really believe in them now, because they are the old gods and they are not like, it's not the main religion any longer since a very long time. But
people reckon they had powers back in the day.
Yeah, it was like the old gods that your ancestor would worship. And although they are not the main gods any longer, like people still had knowledge about them, and also sagas, for example, about especially Icelandic sagas that talk about your ancestors and stuff, or even Landnámabók, they tell about, your ancestor that settled the land from who you descend from, they were pagan and so on and so on. So this kind of, I don't think people would believe in them, but still is kind of material, kind of characters that you can use in this sense. But although, especially also post-Catholicism, they're a bit, as Kári mentioned earlier, a bit fallen angels. It's like, I'm not necessarily saying they're the demonic figures now, but they're a bit, on the opposite side of the main religion and what God, about. So I think it makes sense to use them in this kind of context and material.
I had a little bit of a light bulb moment then.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody could have seen the little cogs turning in my head, because I've always thought, it was something that you said that kind of triggered it, because I've always thought of the old times as like, let's just use this for example, the 1500s in Iceland versus like the 950 or whatever, when people did believe in the old gods versus Christianity. I always thought of it as people in the 1500s would just look back and go, oh, well, they were wrong. We believe in God. He was always there. That's just what's right. Versus maybe the idea of, oh, they believed in that and that was real then, and now it's just kind of changed and we just believe in, the one true God now, versus the idea of like, oh, that just never existed. It was never even a real thing. They were just wrong. And I always thought of that because maybe that's just the more modern way of thinking of it, of just being like, oh, it didn't exist. They were just wrong. Whereas maybe people did think, oh, well, it was a real thing. It just isn't now.
Yeah, I think they would still maybe think, well, they were still believing the wrong gods, but maybe it was not necessarily so much, how can I say?
They knew it was part of the history.
It was part, basically. Your ancestor believed in the pagan gods. That's okay. These gods, eventually they are false gods when, like, people back in the days, only God is real and whatever, but it was not so condemned necessarily. Also think about when sagas are recorded. This is post-Christian times. It's like Catholicism is in Iceland, and you write down this material, and you don't write down only biblical or Christian material. People back in days decided to write down about also pagan material and sagas of Icelanders. It's just so. It was not something that they wanted. It was not material they wanted to go lost. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Although you can still say, yeah, well, these people believe in the pagan gods, it was false gods, but nevertheless, it's a kind of story that you still want to write down because it's also about your ancestry, and that was very important in medieval times.
Mm-hmm. Before, Kári, I know you said there was another little book that you wanted to mention before we wrap up. Before we get there, do we see any mention or precursors to things like the Helm of Or or the Vegvisir? Are they starting to show around this sort of time?
Not Vegvisir. Vegvisir is tested.
It's younger.
Yeah, it's younger. But Ægishjálmur, the Helm of Or, we can see that in this manuscript. Yeah. And sometimes it's used to protect your livestock against sickness or something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We see that in court documents that, this farmer, he was busted with Ægishjálmur and he was carving it on his livestock. Let's punish him.
Or he was carving it on, like.
So we're starting to see it circulate around. And, it's... we can see that Ægishjálmur also in Völsunga saga and in Eddic poetry, but it has a different purpose and different function. There it is a physical helmet, but in this material it's a symbol.
Yeah, and he's in Galdrabók, so yeah.
Is it the same symbol that people associate with today? For anybody listening, will know what it looks like.
Yeah.
In Galdrabók, it's not the typical Ægishjálmur you see in...
Circular.
It's more simple.
Yeah.
More simple.
Slightly different, but it has the same name.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So where do we see the first use of it in that? I'm going to call it like a snowflake-looking symbol, because that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. And it's similar to Vegvisir as well. They're quite similar, although the ends of the symbols are a bit different.
Yeah, so it's like an 8-legged stave or arm. I don't know whether you call them legs or arms.
Yeah.
But the 8 branches.
Mm-hmm.
You see this symbol
Isn't he
back in the day, and even you can see this symbol in bronze age carvings, but I don't think they're related.
Not exact, this one.
No, but I don't think they're related. I think they're also just a little bit cognitive, like to draw this is very basic drawing.
But maybe Dan was asking which manuscript you find also the Ægishjálmur that we know nowadays, the most famous version of it that is similar to Vegvisir. Isn't Hulda?
No, that's a 16th century manuscript.
This is a different one. It's not in Galdrabók, although you have Ægishjálmur there, but it's not maybe exactly the symbol, the most famous, let's say the famous version of it.
So it's the word, and I guess the protective nature is a through line, but the symbol's different.
Yeah.
Also, the term Ægishjálmur, there is this saying in Icelandic, which is, I think, a little bit old. Að bera ægishjálm yfir aðra. It means you carry helm of awe or terror over other. It means that you're a little bit dominant.
Okay. Yeah.
He said in
So if someone is a little bit over the other, like with dominating, then you say hann bar ægishjálm yfir hann. He carried the ægishjálmur over him. It doesn't literally carry the helmet, or it doesn't literally...
It's obviously figurative.
It doesn't literally have the symbol around him or something, but it's an interesting saying. But I wrote also the second part of the book is a manuscript that is a little bit different, or it's quite different.
It's quite different, I would say, from
the Galdrabók. And to my surprise, when I started to transcribe it, This manuscript has never been transcribed nor translated.
Wow.
And it is from the 1600s, and it is not very big one, but it has a lot of drawings of figures with line passing through their eyes.
It's actually very tiny.
And going through their ears.
Oh,
wow. And to my mind, that is actually way cooler material.
Galdrabók is very cool, but this is to my mind. Now we're going to say why.
Why do you think it's been overlooked? Why has it never been?
I think because it's very hard to read. It has a lot of abbreviations.
Yeah,
and so.
But I think we, and Kári especially, like we managed to crack the code.
I spent a couple of months trying to transcribe this manuscript.
Really?
And then I brought it to my friends who are like scholars in the university and let them confirm to what I wrote. So then I got Haukur Þorgeirsson, who is assistant professor in Árnastofnun, to go over it with me. And I think I somewhat have gotten what it's about, but there is still more than one question
marks, yeah,
because there's a lot of abbreviations and a lot of personal abbreviations, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense for you that you're writing your manuscript, you know, but for us it's a bit like, okay, what word is it, like, yeah,
yeah.
But this is a manuscript that the manuscript collector Árni Magnússon got in 1697. And this manuscript has received rather limited scholarly attention. It's a very small and thin grimoire.
It's like teeny tiny, like I think like this.
Yeah, or even smaller.
Even smaller. Yeah. It's called Galdrabók.
Aye.
No, but it's a very tiny type. It looks more like possibly something a bit like pocket size.
Okay, yeah, like a pocketbook.
Yeah.
And we don't know who owned this manuscript, but Árni received it in 1697, and with it came a little note that says, I bring you in good trust a very old and small calfskin manuscript that contains knowledge on how people in the past communicated and behaved around semi-homo, or huldufolk, as we call them. So huldufolk is a little bit thou who shall not be named, which is another name for álfar, or the elves. And inside this manuscript, you find information how to communicate with those, with álfar, through your dreams. You find to get information from them,
which is also very Icelandic.
Yeah, you find this is a living folklore. Yeah. And even up to the 19th, 20th century, you have people going, like when people would settle on a new farm. They would sometime go to a little mound where they think the elves are living in, or where the
rocks or hills, yeah.
And they would say, "I want to build a house very close hereby. If you're against it, come to my dream and tell me why, and let me know."
Oh wow! Okay.
So this is something that is a very living folklore.
Yeah.
And
I mean, still nowadays there are, people that say that they got dreams, or also when we have to build new roads or stuff, and maybe there's a rock or something there that is said since centuries that is like where elves live and stuff. Very often, instead of destroying it, you rather you build the road around it, so you avoid destroying something. It's still alive nowadays,
Okay.
You never know. You don't want to fuck up with the elves, even if you don't. You just rather.
No. Maybe you want me to read a little bit from this manuscript.
Absolutely, yeah.
It starts with, many are there things that young people like to conjure. This following magical art was used by the old folks, though today is known only to a few. And then the first charms says, greetings, earth dweller, which is the elf or the huldufolk or the álfur. Tell me news, I call upon you. Up, you shall stand. I want to find you. Let me see that you lay in here. Up, you shall stand. When I am sleeping, peacefully you shall to me converse. If you died not long ago, lend me your ears and let me see you, so we both have vision and hearing. I will praise you from now on, and be in any instance kind to you, if you like me, and to me speak about most things that I want to know. I conjure you in the name or for the name of all creatures, and may this be. Up you shall stand when I have fallen asleep. In friendly terms you should talk to me. Be it so as I say. There's a lot of performance going on here. It seems that you would walk to the mount or to the cliffs where this figures lived, where this elf lived, and recited to it. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And the next charm is also quite interesting. It's rather...
it's a bit more obscure.
It's a little bit more obscure, but it seems that the first charm, you're raising it up to talk to you. And the second one is, it seems to be when you want to put it to rest again.
Oh, okay.
Because you're summoning something, right? Then you have to reestablish the order, the balance. So you
can't just have elves running around everywhere.
No,
exactly. So you summon something and then you just put it back asleep.
Wow.
If you're also, they say, if you're not dead long ago, there's also this is a bit unclear, like if this is actually just elves or a person that died not very long time ago, but you want to gain information. It could be also more necromancy.
But it's not a graveyard.
No, so it's more like in landscape.
Yeah, so very interesting material.
So how old do you think this? Because obviously in that note it says, because you said it was given to the gentleman in 1697.
Yeah.
And in the note it says this is a very old.
Is what the old folks would do back in the days.
Oh, okay. So is he saying it's what the old folks would use, not the actual manuscript is old?
No, the manuscript is still 1600, right, Kári?
Yeah, like 1600, I would guess.
Okay.
But yeah, the note says this is what is a practice, what the old folks would do, although we don't have more details about that. But I think though, and Kári, correct me if I'm wrong, like the idea of creatures, these entities, or even the dead being in the landscape is actually very old. Like you see that also in Icelandic sagas, like Eyrbyggja saga. It's very Icelandic, like dead people are in the landscape, in the hills, in the mountains. They're kind of always surrounding you somehow. So this makes so much sense here in Iceland. When we were reading it, it was like, this is very Icelandic. And honestly, it's a very old concept, although the material, it doesn't go back as obviously Viking Age or early medieval times, but the concept is actually old.
And receiving information or knowledge from a dead person is something that we see even in the saga material.
Yeah.
There is this late or early 14th century short tale, Thorvalds Þáttur Jarlskalls, wherein a man named Hallbjörn rests on Þorleifur Jarlskald's grey mount in order to learn how to become a great poet. And later, when Hallbjörn falls asleep on the grey mount, he dreams that Þorleifur opens up his grave and he stands up and teaches him poetry. Yeah. So this is
it's something old. The concept is arguably old, but also like practice, for example, or Utiseta in the Nordic context, where you, especially in certain liminal nights, I don't know, like St. John nights, for example, during summer, or in certain periods of the year where you go to a grave mound and you spend the nights there, sitting on it or sitting by it, and it's a sort of ritual to try to get some answers to questions you may have, trying to get some knowledge. The idea per se is very, very old.
Yeah.
Also getting information through dreams. Even in the saga material, dreams occur at least 530 times.
Yeah.
So it's
very Icelandic as well.
Yeah, and it's something that is a very strong belief in Iceland up to even modern times. Sometimes people get their news through dreams.
Also about naming babies, for example.
Yeah, naming kids.
Yeah, like you decide the name of your baby is because, I dreamt that, the name must be this one and I cannot change it, you know, like this sort of. Yeah.
Sometimes pregnant mothers, they dream that it's called Napnavit, and then they dream that a certain person come to their dream and tells you the baby you have in your stomach should be named this or that.
Oh, okay.
And it's considered, it brings bad luck, at least superstition says it's bad luck if you don't listen to that and you change the name of the baby. So if you believe in that and you get this dream, then you usually stick to it.
I have relatives who are named.
Here we go. So it's still alive.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm sure that's a tradition that still rings true. And same with going to a cemetery to sit and speak with someone or listen and just be around. That's a ritual that's performed to this day still to have that connection, whether you believe that you're gonna actually get something from it or it's just a release. It's something that we still do.
Absolutely.
Still do today.
And different cultures. I mean, like worldwide.
Yeah. So what about the images, the little pictures you said with the line through the eyes and the ears? What do you think they represent? Is that just the communication through the line?
Human figures, like drawings. And then there are a lot of symbols. And do you think we managed to share a picture of the manuscript? If we share something in the chat, is something that people can see?
Yeah, you can put it in there. And I can pull it up on my screen, or
can you do screen sharing?
Or you can, or I can let you screen share if you want.
Or maybe if I just a moment. Don't you also have it on Facebook, Kári? Like your.
So be a little moment for me to plug our YouTube, and people can look at the visual aspects, because whilst this is mainly a podcast, we do put all the episodes on YouTube, just not a Mythology podcast on YouTube, and then you can see, and a lot of the time there are visual aspects. People will bring in little bits to show, they'll hold things up, or we'll pull artwork or little images like this. So if you are only listening, maybe take a timestamp note and then pop over to YouTube, and you can see the little pictures and get that visual element to the show as well.
Let's see if I manage to share it.
Okay, so what I can do is I can allow you to you should be able to screen share at the bottom. Little.
I'm actually, let's see if I manage to. Yeah, I put it in the chat at least.
Okay. You can put it in there, and then I can share it.
Yep.
Oh, wonderful! Oh, they're creepy, aren't they? Wow.
It's very creepy. It's so cool.
My friend, he saw this manuscript the other day. He's a PhD student, and
in Árnastofnun.
And he was in Árnastofnun the other day and saw this manuscript, and he just said, "I'm flat out scared to this manuscript."
Yeah, this manuscript is creepy, it's scary. I don't like the vibe it comes from it. Like,
It's frightening.
He said. Okay, does that pull it up? Does that show in?
Yes.
Yep.
So people can see that. So you have these human anthropomorphic figures.
Oh my god!
And as you see, there are like these lines going through eyes.
It's almost like music. I don't know. It's like
cool.
Kind of. I don't know why that makes me think.
Yeah. Well, there are these symbols that. They're all different, and you don't find exactly the same ones in other manuscripts. So
these symbols that we're looking at here, can you see my? I don't know if you can see my cursor or not.
Yeah.
But the one in the top left. What would that mean? Maybe not necessarily in this specific one, but for any kind of.
It's so hard. We don't know. Also, like, you don't find it in other manuscripts, for example. Like they are just like, I guess, is something that the person using this spell would carve. I don't know if it's something like a sort of alphabet is something that you symbolize, something that you recite, like what we were reading, up, you shall stand. We don't know. So that's why it's so fascinating. Like
I think it's also important to underline that, I'm the first one to transcribe this manuscript.
Yes.
And I think, there are discoveries to be made. I'm maybe pioneering the road,
Yeah, this is maybe just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So if anyone knows anything more about this, let me know, please. I would be very interested to know about.
So could this be, let's say, just a guess, that maybe these three could be like raising this little figure, and then you would have this would be maybe what you were asking, and then these ones here could be like putting it back to rest? Like maybe. Could it be as simple as like that linear journey?
It could. I mean, like there's.
I think
we don't have a.
I think. I think this arguably are some letters, but what exactly?
This one looks like a pound sign. So I don't know if this is like the British pound little symbol here. That could be a money thing.
Give it a coin. Give a coin to the earth.
But it's interesting that these letters are touching a line that passes through the eyes and perhaps the ears of these figures.
Yeah,
it's definitely that's interesting, because it is definitely like the head and then out the eye. That's obviously very deliberate, isn't it? That it's not like eye to eye or head to head. It's in the head, out of the eye.
Yeah,
I think it perhaps symbolizes some power over the creature. You have control over it.
Maybe those are words, what you are saying, like you are in control, right? You are doing the spell. You want to be friendly with this creature. You want to obtain some knowledge. But then, as we said, like the second part of the spell was to
and I think I saw in the chat, if I'm correct me wrong, this is also in the edition I translated for Hildir.
Yeah, so you get this drawing in the book
and introduction to it. I tried to introduce this as best as I can.
Yeah,
and this is available on hildir.com, which is spelled
HYLDYR.com. We can also
that's it,
in the chat.
And for those who don't want to wait for the physical book, there are ebooks available as well.
So that's
I was just speaking to them this morning actually about hopefully getting tons of stock on the website. So hopefully that would be
awesome.
But make it a little bit easier for people over the European side of the world.
Yeah. And we also see in the chat about the translation is in the Hildir version of the Galdrabók. Yes,
Perfect. Let's wrap this up, and then we'll quickly let people ask you some questions, and then we'll get out of it. Because I know you're working tonight, right, Kári?
Yeah, in 30 minutes.
In 30 minutes. Okay, we'll be quick. We'll keep you for like 10 minutes. Okay, and then we'll just let people ask some questions, and we'll let you get out of here. Well, thank you very much for your time. Do you both want to give a quick shout out to where people can find you, follow your work? Obviously, we've said you can get the book on hildir.com.
You have your page on Instagram?
Yeah, I have this Instagram page, Sagas of Iceland. But if people want to follow the material Hildir, that I think it's best to follow them on Instagram. They are publishing a lot of cool stuff, and I know there's a lot of cool stuff coming as well.
Yeah. And by the way, regarding like the book, Kári and I, we are going to be in Portland, Olympia, and Seattle in January.
Oh, nice.
There are some events related to the book, so we're going to go there and be guests.
Oh, wow.
So if you follow Hildir, also on Instagram, they were saying like the location, and there should still be tickets for some of the events. Like it's getting sold out, so I don't know if there's people, so here in the public that are actually in that area and they want to, come
that's fun.
event, so they get to talk with us. That's the 10th, 11th, and 12th of January, if I remember correctly.
I think 2 of them are sold up, but one of them is first come, first get.
Yeah.
I don't
remember which one though, but just saying that we are coming. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Yes. Oh, I'd love to see that. If you do one, you should need to do one in the UK or in Europe.
Oh, that would be,
nice.
Like next step would be, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if anybody wants to follow me, it's Daniel_Farrand1 or Horns of Odin for the business, and then it's just Nordic Mythology podcast across the board on all the different platforms. But yeah, let's wrap this up and we'll let people ask you some questions.